It makes it an exciting time to be alive, and it's just been an incredible, year, I think, for everyone. Going through that election cycle and just seeing all this happen in real time. I mean, these people online, they'll say nothing ever happens, right? And there's a phrase online. I kind of like it. Nothing ever happens. Don't worry. But right now, I feel like everything happens all the time. There's a lot of things that are
Yeah,
actually in motion.
it's incredible. I'm sitting here in the Stanford campus, and if we had this conversation a year ago, and somebody had said to me, you know, they're going to uncover this this scandal that Stanford researchers are charging the federal government 50 to 60, 70% overhead on what was really $1 billion of federal energy grants, HHS, and it's going to stop. Or if somebody said, they're going to enforce the 2023 Supreme Court rule, and there's not going to be any more quote unquote theme houses that are 99% exclusive to one particular race. You're not going to have any auxiliary graduation ceremonies that are 99% exclusive to one race. Or they're going to look very carefully where you're getting your money from China. They're going to look very carefully and tax your endowments. And they're going to withhold federal money unless you can ensure First Amendment rights for visiting. I would have thought that's crazy. They're so arrogant. They're so powerful. They have these multi-billion-dollar endowments. No president in his right mind would take these universities on. And he did. And he's winning. And it's astounding. And the same thing with the Smithsonian, the same thing with NPR. NPR was sacrosanct. And all of a sudden, it's just like that. It's like the emperor has no clothes. He understands that people where they are, and he's saying these people are buck naked.
Hmm.
And I'm the only one in the crowd who
Hmm.
can see it. But once I tell you that they're naked, you will agree that they're naked, and therefore we won't have anything to do with them. And that's what he's doing.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's so well said, and it's the prestige ladder that younger people are trying to climb. It doesn't exist anymore. It's and people are realizing
No.
that the credibility of these institutions is gone. But let's I'm going to go back to education in a bit, but let's talk about the Democrats and the response of the left so far, because you're a keen observer of these movements, and what we've seen since the election, I mean, is a lot of talk about doubling down. We need to get meaner, we need to get tougher, is what they're saying to themselves. And of course, for them, this has always been supposedly about saving democracy itself. I mean, they used existential language, they were eating that stuff like candy for years since the emergence of Trump. This has been an existential crisis for the left. Democracy itself, right, is our very form of government is what is being threatened. And now, lo and behold, right, literally Hitler, as they say, is sitting, in the White House doing all this stuff, and it's popular. So how do you read their response, and where do you think they go from here?
Well, there's the immediate, and then there's the existential explanation for where they are, which is in chaos. They don't have any political power. They've lost the House, they've lost the Senate, they do not have the White House, and they don't have the Supreme Court. They do have the lower courts, but they can ultimately be overturned by the Supreme Court. And more importantly, they set certain precedents. Obama's use of executive orders, for example, that are very convenient for a powerful Republican president like Trump. So they're frustrated that they can't affect anything politically. And then they thought they could use extra legal methods, so they raided Mar-Lago. They had 93 criminal indictments. Uh, and if you count E. Jean Carroll's crazy suit, 5 different courtrooms, 25 states were trying to get him off the ballot. They impeached him twice his first term. They tried him as a private citizen, 2 assassination attempts. And he's a Nietzschean character that it just made him stronger. The more they tried to destroy him, the stronger. So that frustrated them. And then so that manifests itself kind of immediately in hitting watermelons with a club or a bat, or Hakeem Jeffries posing with a bat, or Jasmine Crockett scatological, scatology, all of this SH stuff, or Cory Booker with these crazy pseudo filibusters, or these Texas people and this performance art fleeing to Chicago. So they're so frustrated that they, most recently a mariachi band and all this are screaming. So that's a symptom that they tried to destroy them, and in the process they destroyed institutions. They were willing to do that by waging lawfare. We've never seen any of those things I just mentioned, raiding a ex-president's house, or trying to remove a major candidate of one of the parties from the ballot. But it all failed, and now they have no political power. So then the question is, why did they get in this position? And I think the answer is that they became the party of the subsidized poor and the very upper middle class, professional classes, and the billionaire class. 9 trillion market capitalization in Silicon Valley, the Zuckerbergs, Soros, all those people, and Bloomberg, all of them. And the reason was, I think they thought that globalization that enriched the two coasts who had global skills, they had a market suddenly of 6 billion people with media, law, investment, hedge funds, universities. And then the people in the middle who were muscular and lost out on manufacturing, assembly, resource exploitation, oil, gas, those type of workers that were offshored or outsourced. They created a kind of a narrative. We're the smart people. That's why we're wealthy. That's why San Francisco and LA in the 90s and the early century of the 21st are so much better than you people. And that's why the people on the East Coast are so much better. And you people are clingers and deplorables and irredeemables and chumps and drags and most lately garbage, because we're the winners. And now that we've won and we're affluent, we're not subject to the consequences of our ideology. We can use you as lab rats. So we'll try transgender on you. We'll try the new Green Deal. We'll have solar wind mandates. We don't care what the kilowatt price is. We don't care what gas prices are, because we're protected by our wealth and our degrees and our zip codes. And that changed the Democratic Party. If you go back in 92 and 96 and look at their convention statements under Clinton, my God, they're to the right almost of Republicans. We got to close the border. Illegal immigration has to end. We have to deport people. Juveniles who commit crime should be tried as adults. We need more police officers. We need to balance the budget. That was the Clinton response to McGovernism and Carterism. But so what I'm getting at is that this demographic change, or this economic or financial change, made it a party of, well, we don't have any popular middle class anymore. We don't want them. All we need to do is open the borders, subsidize the poor, subsidize the non-white, and concentrate on the power of money to influence the media, and your Google searches the order of your Google searches will be affected. We have insidious ways of retaining power without popularity. And somebody came along and beat them at their own game. And that was Trump, who was a master of the media, who was a master of alternate media, popular culture. And that creates a lot of frustration on their part as well. They thought that they were transforming to a net zero world, Green New Deal, DEI. It wasn't just DEI or affirmative action. There was a new vitriolic anti-white, and you saw that with Joy Reid the other day. You saw that with a New Yorker writer, Doreen St. Felice. It was acceptable now to say that 70% of the country were stupid, or they smell, as this New York writer had said, or what Jasmine Crockett says. And all of that was going to be institutionalized. And that was part of the new Democratic Party. And Trump came along and said, I don't think most people like this stuff. And I'm going to find out who they are that don't like it. I'm going to get them out to vote. And it was very hard in 2016 and 2020, but he learned. And the final thing is, maybe the best thing was that he did lose 2020, because he learned in those wilderness years exactly how the left got power and how to neutralize it. And then when he came back in, he said, I'm going to appoint people on my ideological turf. It's not going to be any more of these first-term people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to actually appoint people who have been victims of the very agency they're going to run, like a Kash Patel or Tulsi Gabbard or Jay Bhattacharya, so I can trust them. And it's been a remarkable first 8 months how effective he's been. And I thought by now he'd be polling 30% given the magnitude of the counter-revolution, but it's just amazing what he's been doing.
Yeah, and to see it reflected with such influence throughout the entire culture. Some of these cultural moments, like the Sydney Sweeney gene ad. I mean, Sydney Sweeney has good genes would have been illegal a year ago. I feel like, but you
absolutely. I mean, he understood that immediately. It was on so many levels. Here was a young girl, and she looked like a girl. She was full breasted. She had curves, and all of a sudden, the Mulvaney thing was over with, or the Lizzo thing was over with. And she was proud of being sexy and young and attractive. And the commercial people said, we're going to make money on this because people really silently and quietly agree with us. And then Trump saw that and glommed onto it. And so, yeah, it's a multifaceted. It reminds me so much of the Thermidor reaction to the Jacobins. The Robespierre brothers were put out of business by a counter-revolution, and they were exactly like the left. We have 1619, they had year zero. Our people are secularist or atheist or agnostics. They were ratio was going to be their supreme deity, reason, and it was trying to rename the days of the week, the new months, everything. It was a holistic revolution, and then suddenly and then of course they got Napoleon as a result. But Donald Trump has been very successful, and he's got people around him who are so much more gifted and knowledgeable. And I'm not making fun of the first term, but they didn't think they were going to win, so they were unprepared when they did win in 2016. But this time they must have studied the left chapter and verse, because they really know how to push their buttons. And maybe one of the legacies of Donald Trump, besides his positive contributions, will be he had a unique, uncanny ability to make the Democrats expose themselves in a way that they really are, and is very repulsive and off-putting to the public. And every time he gets in a fight with one of them, they lose, and they start to show their hypocrisy and paradoxes in a very negative fashion to the public.
No, exactly. And this administration, I mean, I would, I'll put it this way. We just take Claremont, my Claremont Association. Last time the biggest thing that we would work on, right, was getting people in who actually understood the agenda. And there weren't a lot of people, right? I mean, some people rose in the first administration because they said, get that kid who understands what the president is trying to do, because it was incomprehensible, as you pointed out to a lot of these people. They couldn't even understand it. This time, you can go walk around the Eisenhower building and high five all the Claremont fellows, that we were all together for the last 6 years.
And it's very hard for the left. I think they're so confused, because if you take that Madison Square entourage, suddenly he walks in and there's Dana White, there's Joe Rogan, there's the late Hulk Hogan, but there's also RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, and Speaker Johnson. It's like a menagerie of popular cultural heroes, some people from the left that have gone to join him. And he's not a predictable Republican. And he's more conservative in many ways than a predictable Republican, but he's transactional, utilitarian as well. And he's able to get people in various aspects of his agenda to come on board. And a lot of them are not traditional Republicans and conservatives, and that drives the left crazy. RFK drives them absolutely insane. And Joe Rogan to the extent, and Elon Musk was the same way. And it's what he's done with Silicon Valley. He's basically gone to Silicon Valley to Andreessen and David Sachs and Peter Thiel and all of them, and Elon Musk for a while, and probably in the future. He said to them, I'm kind of like the war production board of World War II. I don't care what your politics are. I just want to win. and you guys are being censored by Europe, and you're getting your stuff stolen by China, and your country is falling apart. So here it is, a blank check. You go do what you do, make money for yourself, but make money for your country. And it's kind of like FDR, who was a socialist, telling Henry Knudsen of GM and Henry Kaiser and Henry Ford, William Knudsen and Henry Ford and Henry Kaiser, make money, but build me Liberty ships and B-24s more than the Germans, the Japanese, and Italians combined, and we'll win. And that's a very weird message, but it appeals to a lot of people that are not political, even on the left. This guy comes along and he says, wow, he's going to protect us from European censorship.
Exactly.
Canada wants to have a retrogressive tax and take $2 billion from Silicon Valley, and Trump is going to tell them if they do that, they're going to be in big trouble, and they back down. So it's really bizarre. It takes sometimes it's hard to follow, but it's the one common denominator is he wants to see the United States preeminent in every aspect: culture, economics, politics, military, and he's got a great trust in the American people that they're preeminent people. They're not just one of many. It's completely antithetical to the Obama mission statement.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't help but go into a little bit about you in this interview, because here you are sitting in Stanford from your commute from the fields, and I'm very curious about your life and how you've lived it, and your own self-reflection on how this has impacted your thought and your work. I mean, you're writing books like The End of Everything, and you've consistently, I believe, been right in one place, or been associated with. You have a farm. You've been there for a while.
I still
right?
live there. It's 200 miles away. I commute every week.
Yeah.
And so anybody that grows up on a farm, and it's been in my family 6 generations, but when you're 18, you have to work after school, and you have to do your chores, and you can't go into town, so you want to go away. So my brothers and I went to UC Santa Cruz, a really radical place when it first opened. Then I went to Stanford as a graduate student. But my mother had done the same thing. My grandfather had mortgaged his little farm and sent his daughters to Stanford in the 1930s and 40s. But they all came back. And he did that because he thought that they would be able to save the farm if they were educated. He never went to college. But my point is that my parents told me, you've got to get an education and be exposed to the world. I lived overseas for 3 years, but you'll never find a better moral climate than a small farm in the Central Valley. And don't let anything go to your head. So during graduate school, I would come home every 2 weeks and drive a tractor. And I was a visiting professor at Stanford, and I came home every week. And I still chose not to live here. I have an apartment here, but I stay 90% or 80% of my time, if you count Christmas and vacation, and the commute on my farm in southwest Fresno County. And it's been very valuable to me because I could tell that Trump was going to win, and I wrote that in 2024 because my wife and I we live in a community that's 95% Hispanic. In 2016 and 2020, I'd say they were negative, 55-45 Trump. But I would say to my wife, I just went into Food for Less. 8 people came up to me and said they were worried Trump was not going to win. They were all Hispanic males. And I said, how about you? And she said, I've never seen one Hispanic male who's going to vote for Harris. And you get a very different view than the academic life and the values. And it was very important for me as a supposed intellectual or writer to live with people who were not like that. And then when I'm home, I'm never judged on what I say or write. It's always, our pump went out the other day, and I called a guy, and he said, well, you know where the capacitor is? Yes. Try the capacitor first, then the pressure gauge, and then I'll come over if it's the bearing in the pump. But if I had said, well, I don't know what you're talking about, I would have been ridiculed. So I grew up, and then when I left graduate school with a PhD, there wasn't a lot of jobs for white males in Greek and Latin in the 1980s. So I just farmed full time for 5 years with my grandparents and my parents. And my twin brother and I ran the farm. In those days, it was pretty big, 180 acres. So it was a lot of work, and then I would go up to Fresno State where I taught every day for the next 10 years and do both. So it's been very hectic and stressful, but it's been very good for me to live with people who are poor or middle class. And when I come up here, I don't take Stanford professors very seriously. And, I get a lot of hostility, but it doesn't bother me. I'd be much more worried if people in my hometown didn't like me. But they seem to like the idea that I live there. And they'll always come up and say, are those people at Stanford as crazy as they seem? Yes, they are. They're crazy. And that's kind of the life. It's been schizophrenic. It's, sometimes I'll come home and I'll have a sport jacket from Hoover, and somebody said, why are you wearing a jacket? Or sometimes I'll go to Hoover and I'll have an ag cap on. It goes, what is Bennett and Bennett? I said, it's a concrete pipe company. So, and you just forget which world you're in because they're so antithetical to each other. It's not like there's no bridge between them. One is red state traditionalism, even though it's been metamorphosized with immigration, and the other is bicoastal cosmopolitan utopianism.
Exactly right. The two worlds apart that you bridge, but that is also, I think, the source of a lot of wisdom and a lot of wisdom that we've heard from you today. I have to, before we go, I have to say, I want to invite, I'm going to propose this. We have this magazine, Frontier, which I should send you a copy of. This is the first edition. It's beautiful. It's big. It's got, great photography, and it's really, positive vision of what's going on around the country. It's not directly political. But what I would love to do is do a profile of you for that magazine, and hopefully even some photography and some bit about your life. We would love to do that. I think our audience would be very interested in it. And unlike so many other publications, I'm keeping direct politics out of it, right? It's not that we're apolitical, but this is actually a profile about what should be very interesting to a lot of people, which is the manner in which you've kept those roots and that life, and then also contributed to the intellectual discourse.
Yeah, that'll be one. I'll look forward to that and follow it up. Yeah, I always, when people have called me that are apolitical or on the center right, I always try to say yes. But on the left, it's not that I'm overly political or paranoid, but I've had people from the New Yorker do this or the Washington Post, and it's always been a disaster.
Oh yeah.
They'll say, I'm not political. I just want to talk, and then they'll come out and say, I saw a Hispanic man driving a tractor for Mr. Hanson.
Right.
And I wanted to know how much he was making, or I saw a pesticide container nearby that I didn't think was properly stored, or something like that. I always welcome people that are disinterested.
It self-selects here because those people won't work for me. But what you find is a number of people, in all these industries who are now coming out of the woodwork because of the counter-revolution you describe, who are photographers or videographers, who are very interested in this kind of thing. In any event, everyone should get this book. The End of Everything is a topic that concerns everyone. What's the best way for them to get it, Victor?
I think it's just to go on either Amazon or victorhanson.com. I think there's a discount. I have a button there on my website. It's all small letters, HANSON.com, victorhanson.com.
Great. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me.